Here's an update for the folks at Weather 5280. We're watching for the winter storm as it impacts Colorado. If you're wondering about the storm and its impact outside of Colorado, check out my last video published on Sunday. It'll show you the storm, the tornado impact that will be likely across the southeast, and the heavy snow in the Pacific Northwest. For Colorado, let's get to it. Winter storm is on the way. Driving impacts on the way too. Late Monday through Tuesday morning will be the slowest for travelers across Colorado. Here's an in-depth look at the storm as it approaches. I'm going to start off with something interesting, and that's the eruption in Hawaii. Mauna Loa erupted, and you can see right in here this particular satellite image product. See those kind of lime greens or teals that pop out at you? That's sulfur dioxide. So that's part of the ash and that pollution plume that came out of the volcano. And it is going to be headed kind of in generally this direction toward the southern U.S. and northern Mexico. We'll be tracking that, but that's just a side note here. Let's get into the satellite picture. This is traditional, so visible, what we're seeing from space. And this line that you see right in here going that way, that's actually the sunrise as the sun passes on overhead. We do have this storm system right in here with a trailing cold front kind of like this, and that's kind of the parent storm system. But the storm flow in general is coming basically Gulf of Alaska, diving southward over the western U.S. before trying to do something like this and curling back to the northeast. But we have cold air coming in. A lot of snowpack here, good snow extent. So we have cold air coming in to the Pacific Northwest, and it has moisture too, as you can see in the cloud cover. But this is the leading edge right in here. This is the leading edge. All this cloud cover is what's going to be passing on through as we go throughout the night and into Tuesday morning. Right now, impact is minimal. I mean, we have some 50s in Denver as of this video recording, around 32, 33 or so out across the western slope, and Steamboat Springs is in the upper 20s, lower 30s, close there. But look at some of these cameras here on the Ambient Weather Network. Starting to cloud over in Newcastle, Silverthorne getting cloudier, Montrose starting to cloud up too, and no snow as of this recording. So let's find out when we'll start to see some snowfall. I'm going to go to it's not a random choice, but most all model products out there would give you the same result. But let's walk through the timeline of this particular model as it shows the development of snow as we go later today. So we're watching here over the northern mountains. See right in here, Steamboat Springs and the northern north route, and say around Estes Park or so. So Rocky Mountain National Park up in Wyoming. That's when the snow begins to develop, and that'll be happening as we go late in the morning as that cloud cover continues to thicken and the storm gets closer. Let's go later in the day. We're still watching the mountain snowfall, mostly on the higher peaks. And then once we hit about 5 o'clock or so, we're seeing a rain-snow mix out across western Colorado developing. Main snow line is still out over Rawlins and Rock Springs. Let's go forward in time. We're seeing heavier snowfall now developing with a rain-snow mix out of the western slope at Grand Mesa, but you get into northern Colorado around Hayden, Craig, Steamboat Springs, heavier snowfall, and this is around 9 p.m. And as we go forward in time, that heavier snow line tries to move into the northern Front Range, Denver and Fort Collins and whatnot. You can see that snow line right in here. That is the main system, main bout of energy, if you will, main lift area as the system moves through. So as we get into early tomorrow morning, this is 3 a.m., 4, 5, 6, 7 a.m., you can see areas of snowfall cover a decent amount of Colorado. But that storm line, as I back up, it gets heavier, more pronounced there in the deeper blues. And as we get into the early morning hours, kind of fades a little bit, falls apart, becomes more scattered for the metro areas. Kind of the best concentration is around Fort Collins and the Cheyenne Ridge, but it starts to fall apart a little bit. This is 7 a.m., 8, 9, 10, 11, and noon. And we still have some snowfall around. Impactful? Well, that depends on the road situation and drivers. As you go forward in time, we continue to see scattered snow become isolated, and then it ends. So that's your timeline. And we're focusing primarily on tonight for the mountains, overnight, and early tomorrow morning for the metro areas. So Tuesday mornings commute a bit slower. All right, let's compare some models here as far as snowfall totals. This is one particular model it is a high resolution model. It's called the NAM. This particular one is set to 3 kilometers. That's a pretty good resolution there, and that's why you can see some details over the mountains and things. But snowfall totals, as that comes through, gives you an idea of a couple to a few possible in the metro areas, certainly more in the mountains, and more kind of in this line from southeastern Wyoming into the Panhandle of Nebraska. Let's compare that particular model to another, and this is an ensemble, which is basically one model run multiple times in slightly different ways, and then you average it out. So this is the European ensemble of total snowfall. Kind of the placement of the blobs is the same, and certainly up to the north, a concentration of snow in Wyoming and Nebraska, and a couple to a few inches around Denver. Why it's not as detailed is the resolution of this particular model is not as high as the last one I showed you. But in both cases, we get the general idea that the central and northern mountains are favored with snowfall in Colorado, and it quickly tails off as we get away from the mountains and away from the metro areas. Let's go to kind of the probability products. So rather than looking at total snowfall of each model and what it thinks is going to fall, this is what it thinks probabilistically or odds. So we're walking into the sports book in Vegas and looking at that ensemble model, and it's given me some odds here of getting more than 3 inches of snowfall. And it's not particularly high around Denver. You get closer to Boulder, though, and you start to hit some odds of 70% likely to get at least 3 inches, and certainly a bullseye there in the mountains. That makes sense. Same with Wyoming and Nebraska. Matches the model output. What if we would jump ahead and I'm sitting there in the sports book and I'm curious, should I bet anything on 6 inches or more out of the storm? And you can see there are some pockets in the high country. Here's a pocket not too far to the west of Fort Collins where the probabilities are higher. But to get more than 6 inches out of the storm, probabilistically, the odds are not necessarily in favor of getting more than 6 in the metro areas. So we're kind of looking at a couple to a few inches, as mentioned with some of that modeling example I gave you. Let's go to our Insider page at Weather 5280. If you just go to Insider and then Front Range Snowfall Gamblers, you can grab your snow ratio. And the models I showed you were based on 10 to 1, so we'll leave it there for a moment. But Denver, Fort Collins, Pueblo, Colorado Springs, Boulder, and Castle Rock, excuse me, we're breaking down 1 to 3 days. So that's when the snow is coming through Denver. And for Denver itself, that's DIA, 61% chance of getting 1 inch or so. Colorado Springs, about 25% chance of getting an inch. That's Boulder, that starts to climb much higher. And we're looking at, about a 22% chance of getting 4 inches or so. I think the snow ratio will be a little bit higher with this storm. So let's just go up to 13 for kicks and giggles. So that's a different snow ratio. And this is kind of where you're going to see some following maps, snowfall forecast maps for Weather 5280. And this is kind of how it's based, kind of on that 13 to 1 snowfall ratio. And that puts Boulder up here at about kind of the likely range kind of ends at about 4 and starts to trickle into 5s or 6s. So a couple to a few inches for most folks, but Boulder may see a little bit more than that. Again, these are the gambler products, not based on these. It's a different modeling how we handle this. But it gives you another example, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Just show you what the data is looking like and the probabilities. So we're sitting in the sports book. What do? Well, we know there's going to be an impact. Storm alerts are going to be highest in the northern mountains. That's where we have a winter storm warning in pink, and then the purple winter weather advisory. And that does cover Fort Collins, Boulder, west side of Denver, and across the Denver metro out toward DIA, and then sections of the foothills down to the south. Certainly covers Wyoming and the Panhandle of Nebraska because they have the higher probabilities of getting an impactful snowfall. But these alerts kind of tie into the travel impact based on totals. But here's the winter storm severity index, and we get some moderate impacts here in the high country. Makes sense where the deeper snow will be. Also, moderate impact here along 36 between Denver and Boulder. Makes sense too, right? They're going to see some higher totals there potentially. We do have what is categorically written as minor from Castle Rock to Fort Collins to Greeley. As we've seen, even in the weather world, if a minor snow comes through, we can see some really bad traffic in the metro area. Too many of us on the roads at one time, and we're not paying attention and going too fast. I digress. So be careful Tuesday morning. This winter storm severity is really kind of a 12-hour period, give or take, from, say, Monday evening into late Tuesday morning. That leads me to the snowfall totals. So through Tuesday, this is kind of our best estimate. It's based on some of the probabilities and the model placement of things. But we do have the higher totals up into the high country, north of Steamboat Springs. So we're starting to push the 10 to 16 inches. I wouldn't be surprised if some mountain ranges pick up a couple feet of snow, but that's pretty isolated. And we're not trying to get that specific on these maps. These maps are meant to give you a generalized look at where the snowfall will be. Uh, and then for the metro areas, in fact, I'll just zoom in on here. Once you hit the foothills and get closer to Boulder, Superior to Boulder, Niwot, Lyons, just outside of Loveland, just around Fort Collins and Bellevue, you start to get into those higher totals, get to the higher elevations and higher totals there. But by and large, you look at the metro areas kind of within this 2 to 5 inch range. And again, that matches some of those probabilities I showed you. The question mark will be, is this too high? Is this too aggressive for a snowfall forecast based on that snow coming through and that snow line weakening a bit as that snow comes on by? So if the snow line kind of falls apart faster than we expect, these totals are going to be too high. If for some reason that snow line should slow down a little bit and we get another 2, maybe 3 hours of snowfall, these totals would be well in line with that. So a couple of caveats there, a couple of scenarios, but bottom line, this is the most probable situation. So again, for metro areas, all of us have a travel impact, commute impact for Tuesday morning. The highest impact likely comes around Superior, Lafayette, Erie, out toward Boulder or so. And I can't rule out Golden, Layton, things like that too. But you can see all areas of the metro covered in at least some impact for Tuesday morning's drive. Let's chat about temperatures real quick. Monday's a beautiful day, as I showed you on the ambient weather network. We're warm now. Afternoon highs will be sitting in the 50s and 60s over the plains, 30s, 40s in the high country. Let's get into tonight. We're going to get down to around 20, ballpark average or so in Denver, Steamboat 10, Walden 6. Tuesday's highs, these are the highs. 20s is all for much of the state. Let's get into Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. We're down in the single digits for the metro areas, 4 for the low in Fort Collins. Walden, Steamboat, Craig, Hot Sulphur Springs, well below 0. Some of the valleys there in North, Middle, and South Park may go way below 0. Incredible cold Wednesday morning. Then as we look at Wednesday afternoon, we're back into the 30s and 40s as this system begins to clear off.
So that's the data as I see it. For Weather 5280, Matt Makins here. Be safe on the roads tomorrow. You know how crazy things can get if even minor snowfall amounts, in my opinion, come through. It seems like the city slows to a halt. But be careful out there and stay warm. Very cold, as you saw.